All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a real clash of titans in Indian retail today. You've got DMart, the absolute efficiency machine, going head-to-head with Vishal Mega Mart, the super fast-growing challenger. So, the big question is, who's actually better? Let's break it all down.
So before we can even talk about the fight, we got to understand the battlefield, right? And that's India's retail market. It is massive, and it's changing like crazy. I mean, the opportunity here is just huge, and these two companies are right in the middle of all the action.
Okay, so take a look at this. It really puts things into perspective. See that giant slice? That's all unorganized retail. You know, your local corner shops, the kirana stores. And that tiny little sliver? That's the organized retail, the big chains and hypermarkets. So that whole enormous pie, that's what DMart and Vishal are both desperately trying to win.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Now, you might think, hey, they're both value retail, they're probably the same, but nope, not even close. Their game plans are like night and day. They're chasing the same kind of customer, for sure, but the way they're doing it is completely different.
So here's how it shakes out. First, you've got DMart. Think of them as your go-to for groceries and all the daily essentials. Their whole model is built on that. And this is a huge deal, they actually own their stores, mostly in the big cities, you know, your metros and tier 1s. Then you've got Vishal. Their focus is totally different. It's more about affordable fashion, stuff for your home, plus some groceries. And instead of buying, they lease their stores, which has let them just explode into the smaller tier 2 and tier 3 cities. See what I mean? Two totally different playbooks.
Okay, strategy is cool and all, but you know what really tells the story? The numbers. So let's put the strategies aside for a second and just let the data do the talking. We're going to pit them against each other on some really important metrics and see who's actually winning this game.
First up, let's talk about sheer size. Who has more stores? And wow, right out of the gate, Vishal Mega Mart has a huge lead. We're talking 742 stores versus DMart's 432. You can really see how that leasing strategy we talked about has let them just spread like wildfire all over the country.
But wait a second, don't count DMart out yet. Because if we switch from how many to how well, the story completely flips on its head. Check this out. For every single square foot of store space, DMart pulls in over 38,000 rupees. That's more than 3 times what Vishal does. That, right there, is that legendary DMart efficiency everyone talks about. It's just incredible.
Okay, so what about momentum? A great way to check that is something called same-store sales growth. Basically, it just looks at the stores that have been around for a while and asks, are people spending more there than they did last year? And well, Vishal is absolutely crushing it here. Their existing stores are growing at a crazy 12.8%. That tells you customers are loving what they're offering and coming back for more.
And if we look at the very latest numbers, it's the same kind of story. I mean, don't get me wrong, DMart is an absolute giant. Its total sales are more than 5 times bigger than Vishal's. But, and this is a big but, look at that growth percentage. Vishal is growing way faster at 22% year-on-year. That's some serious speed.
So what we have here is a classic showdown, right? It's DMart's incredible efficiency versus Vishal's explosive growth. But what does all this mean for the bottom line, for the actual profit? And for anyone looking to invest, what does it mean for the stock price? Let's dig a little deeper.
Now get ready for this, because this number is a real head-scratcher. When you look at operating margin, that's basically the profit they make before stuff like interest and taxes, Vishal is almost twice as profitable as DMart, 13% versus just 7%. That's probably because they sell more fashion and home stuff, which just has better margins than groceries.
So that leads to the obvious question, right? Is Vishal just flat out the more profitable company? I mean, the numbers seem to say so, but there's a twist in the tail.
And here it is. When you get all the way down to the final number, the net profit margin, the money they actually get to keep, they're practically the same. DMart's at 4%, Vishal's at 5%. So where did that huge advantage Vishal had just disappear to?
Well, remember how we said their business models were totally different? This is where it all comes back. Because Vishal leases all those stores, they have way higher costs for things like rent, depreciation, and interest. All those costs just chew away at that nice big operating profit, and by the time you get to the end, their final profit margin is right back down almost exactly where DMart is.
Okay, so what does the stock market think about all this? When you look at a simple PE ratio, they both look pretty expensive. But the really interesting number is the PEG ratio, because that one takes their growth rate into account.
And when you do that, Vishal suddenly looks a lot more reasonable at about 1.85. DMart, on the other hand, with a peg over 4, well, it looks pretty pricey for how fast it's currently growing.
Whew, okay. So, we've looked at their strategies, their size, their efficiency, their growth, and even how the market values them. It's time to put all those pieces of the puzzle together and ask, what's the final verdict? You know, when you really boil it all down, it comes to a super clear choice. In one corner, you've got DMart, the proven winner, the incredibly efficient giant. And in the other corner, you've got Vishal Mega Mart, the aggressive challenger, the one that's growing like crazy and reaching new customers everywhere. So I'm going to throw it back to you. What do you bet on? The super efficient, steady machine or the high-speed, high-octane growth engine? It's the classic business dilemma. After seeing all the numbers, all the strategies, which team are you on? Growth or efficiency? Let me know.